After the first session of the bank branch audit, where we learn more, now the next session is so crucial on LFAR, long form audit report. To guide us on various aspects of LFAR, we have with our eminent speaker, CA Priyanka Palav, and I request our coordinator, Bijal Modi, to give a brief introduction of our speaker.
Good morning, friends. Welcome, Mr. CA Priyanka ji. Priyanka Palveji is the CA CS MCOM and currently working at HDFC Bank as a senior manager, internal audit group grievances. She was driven and executed various risk-based audit across the real assets and the group grievances. Her core expertise include functional pre-implementation review, digital journey, credit risk, and the ICAAP, credit strategy, thematic audits, and all retail asset products, and RBI mandatory subsidiaries oversights the audit across the key departments such as the risk, compliance, internal audit, finance, and the business. Previously, she was worked as an assistant manager at C&K and Associates LLP from September 2021 to September 2022, where she has handled the various statutory audit, limited review, and the tax audit for the one of the largest private sector banks in India, with the core focus on the retail business. She has been invited as a speaker on the various topics related to the bank's audit in the webinar organized by the ICAI, Women's Wing, and the Young Women Excellence Committee. Presented as a speaker at the multi-technical session on the bank audit organized by the ICI, WIC, and Vikasa. Moderated several panel discussion on the technical session related to the bank audit and NBFC audit organized by the ICAI, WRC for the CA members. Invited as a judge for a technical session on the capital market at a CA students mega conference at Amarbah. Deliver a session on the speaker on a full day workshop in the bank audit organized by the BCAC. College and institution engagement of her is appointed as the member of the board studies accountancy and finance for the term of 3 years academic from 24 to 25 onwards at ML Dhanukar College of Commerce at Villapalim. Invited as a guest lecturer at KC College on the topic called Career Opportunities in the Audit Assurance. Featured in a guest interview for the BAF Times for a college magazine at MLDC, sharing personal insight for her professional journeys. I welcome CA Priyanka ji, and on behalf of JB Nagar Study Circle, I request all the past convener to give and present her the mementos and the gift.
A very good morning to one and all present here. Before I start my session, I would like to give a deep gratitude and vote of thanks to all the dignitaries and to the JB Nagar CP Study Circle members for giving me this opportunity to stand here to share my insights, to share my views on a very prominent topic as we are approaching the financial year end, LFAR, long form audit report. So not taking much of the time, let's deep dive into this particular technical topic. This is going to be the agenda for the today's session, starting off with a kickstart discussion, going with the objectives, how the structure of LFAR is. Here I'm going to present both the sides of the table, that is central statutory auditor as well as the branch auditor. So we get a difference that how the LFAR approach has to be for a central auditor as well as for a branch auditor, because everything is a subset of each other. So some points from the central part, some points from the branch part will give a little more insight on how the approach has to be altogether. Then we are going to deep dive into each section of LFAR to see what are the key areas, what are the key points that are reported in the LFAR, what are the key issues or challenges we generally get to see for that particular section, and what are the challenges that are faced, could be management driven or could be some inherent issues. Then we are going to talk specifically on 2 or 3 of the critical aspects, that is audit trail, weakness in critical processes, and other crucial points which I have collated basis my up-to-date knowledge or up-to-date insight which I have or the experience which I have. Then we will jump, after we collate the understanding of each and every section, we are going to jump on the ideal format, that how a LFAR has to be drafted or how a LFAR has to be structured. What are the critical points that should be noted while we prepare our LFAR, be it the central statutory auditor driven LFAR or a branch driven LFAR. When we draft this report, this crucial report, what are the key points that we need to note? What are the common mistakes or what are the common issues that we should try to avoid? And lastly, as I already mentioned, we are approaching the financial year end. Time management becomes a very key thing. So we'll talk about that as a key learning aspect. Just as a professional protocol, a short disclaimer before we actually proceed ahead with the discussion. Okay, now let's kickstart this discussion with the main premise of this entire topic, even if it's an LFAR, but it talks about audit. So I'll take a minute here to share my understanding, my definition of audit from my years of experience, that how I see audit altogether. How do I envisage audit, or what is my own definition, personal definition of audit? I'm very sure with all senior members like you all with so many years of experience, you would also relate to this definition. A stands for accounting and more. As a newgen auditors right now, what we are, we have to look beyond debits and credits, look beyond the golden rules of accounting. Accounting is not the just thing which has to be taken care in the audit. We have to look a more detailed view behind the financial statements, not just the debits and credits in a particular account or the financial statements, the assets liabilities part. We have to look a more detailed view other than the accounting, the simple accounting thing. It has to be a detailed or an extended view as a new gen auditors. U stands for uniqueness. None of the audits can be a typical checklist-driven audit. We have to keep on engaging ourselves with new learnings, with new developments. We have to keep ourselves buckled up with the new RBI regulation, be it a central auditor or a branch auditor. There are numerous regulations and circulars which we have to comply with. So uniqueness is what the U stands in the audit, because that teaches us as an auditor that we have to keep on unlearn, learn, relearn each and every time we do the audit. It cannot be a very typical or a very checklist driven audit that we have to carry out. We have to keep on reinventing the things. Only then we will have some quality points or quality recommendations to the management, because that is what the central management as well as the branch management will expect from all of us as the central and branch auditors. The D in the audit stands for documentation. Not documented, not done. So when we talk about LFAR, we will also talk about how crucial documentation is all about. And not just LFAR, but audit as a whole, the premise is on the documentation, the work you do, the procedures you follow. If it is not documented, it's not done. As simple as that. The I stands for independence. We as an auditor are looked upon as a very independent party in the entire management hierarchy. We are trusted upon by the bank's management to carry out the entire assignment independently without any conflicts, without any interventions. So we ourselves have to be purely independent, not biased at all, not under any influence, not under any management conversations. We have to make our own independent view, our own professional judgment for any issue, whether at a branch level or at a central level. Lastly, T is timeliness. Audit, planned, executed, reported within time is how fruitful it will be. If we miss the time thing in these 3 stages of the audit is not effective. The audit is not efficient. There is no efficacy in the assignment. So this was just a short definition of audit. I just thought to take this opportunity to share this with you all as a forum I have got. Now, since we have got a definition of audit, now let's move to our prime topic, which is LFAR. Now, what is LFAR? LFAR is like a supplementary report. It is not a replacement of an audit report. As an auditor, we do have to issue an independent audit report under the regulations and guidelines. But LFAR serves as a supplementary report. It is like a more detailed, we all must have seen how a health report comes. You know, there is a summary report, there is a main report with all the final conclusion, but there is also a very comprehensive health report which talks about each and every aspect, each and every profile of our health. Similar way, LFAR is also equivalent to a health report of the entire bank. When we talk from a branch side, it will be a accumulation of the branches taken at the central level, the central LFAR, which talks about the entire bank's management. So LFAR is nothing but a supplementary report to our main report, not a replacement to the main one. Why it was introduced? Because initially, when only independent audit reports were published, it didn't give a more insight to the RBI that what exactly is happening beyond the accounting, the A we talked about. What is happening beyond the accounting? What are the ground level realities or the ground level issues that are happening at a branch as well as at a central level? So that is the reason RBI brought in place LFAR as a concept to bring out more detailed enhancements and comments on the overall health of the bank, on the overall opinion of the auditors, on the management of the bank. It is a structured question-based diagnostic report, as I already mentioned it as a summary health report of the bank. It gives insight on the risk profile, on the control environment, on the risk control framework of the bank. It also gives how operational effectiveness is taken care of. As I also mentioned earlier, it is beyond accounting. It is beyond a true and fair view of the financial statements. It is not just looking at the debit and credit side of the bank's financials, but looking beyond each and every component of that debit and credit side. The major revision in LFAR or the major revamp in the LFAR for central as well as branch was brought 2020 onwards, in which RBI put in place many more reporting components within the LFAR report, which was ideally restricted to few, 2, 3 typical or more of like prominent areas like credit risk and all. But post 2020, there, as we were entering the new era of banking, there had to be certain revamping in the reporting style, in the reporting context. So that is where RBI came up with new components and new portions from 2020 onwards. It is called a shift from transaction-based auditing to risk-based auditing, because transaction-based will not give the ultimatum view that what exactly is the risk, what is the impact. But LFAR, it has to be a risk, it has to be a forward-looking approach. To whom all it is applicable, as we all know, it is for the central statutory auditors, the branch auditors of PSU banks, private banks, and foreign banks. These are the main 3 categories. Just a little background to all of us. What is the objective? It is to identify the gaps in the processes. LFAR is more of like a process improvement document. It is not just a fact-finding document. We have to look at it as an improvement document, be it at a branch, improvement for the branch, and at a central level, improvement for the bank as a whole. What is the focus? The focus is on the risk assessment. As we already talked about, it is not just transaction based, it is risk based. Risk based auditing is the most core area or core feature that RBI is stressing about each and every time. It is telling all the auditors of the banks to shift their focus from a normal approach to a risk based approach. Be it statutory auditors, internal auditors, any auditors. The approach has to be risk based. So is it for the LFAR. Risk assessment plus system evaluation and control weakness. These are the 3 components which togetherly forms part of the LFAR. When we talk about risk assessment, I'll just mention the 2 most important standards of auditing, which will play a very important role for a branch as well as a central statutory auditor, which is SA 315 and SA 330. 315 talks about the risk assessment. 330 talks about the response to the risk assessment. So here, based on the standards on auditing, we as an auditor have to assess the risk, understand the entity, understand the branch structure. We have to identify what are the risks that a branch or at a bank level, central level, it is exposed to. And accordingly, we have to respond to that risk. Meaning, we have to plan our procedures. We have to plan our audit in such a way that we report the LFAR considering the risk assessment, identification, and the execution. So SA 315, 330 together forms a backbone for the LFAR, for the risk-based approach. The core philosophy or the core objectives of LFAR, it is to identify systematic weakness, not just a particular area specific. It has to be what is the issue in the whole system or the whole process, the end-to-end process. The process at the branch, the process at a central level. Processes at branch will accumulate to a central level. It is to evaluate credit, market, operational, liquidity risk. These are the 4 main pillars of the risk framework. These are the very core risk areas which has to be addressed to the LFAR reporting. What is the other objective? To assess the internal audit effectiveness, the internal governance part, the compliance with RBI norms, and the quality of management information system. That how is the internal governance all about? It has a focus on the systematic weaknesses, identifying the gaps, and the risk assessment part, the current as well as emerging. So here we just don't have to stop with identifying the current risk. We have to see the forward-looking approach, that what are the emanating risks that might take place maybe 6 months down the line, 2 months down the line, 1 year down the line. So we have to keep a forward-looking approach. Again, reiterating, it is a shift from transaction testing to risk-based evaluation. Every component of LFAR for a branch as well as for a central auditor, it has to be tested at a risk level. Don't just look at the specific, the factual information of a particular case. Look at the risk. What is the ultimate risk? A single account at a branch could also emanate a larger level risk for a particular branch, and it can accumulate into a higher risk for the at a central management level. So we as an auditor for branch and central level, we have to envisage, we have to quantify what is the risk. Only then our LFAR reporting becomes very effective and efficient. If we are not able to quantify the risk, we should at least try to see what are the possible or the potential risk factors. It's not necessary that each and every time it is possible to quantify or give a number to a risk factor. We can definitely see what are the process gaps, what are the emanating factors to it. So these are some very key objectives that we have to keep in mind while we proceed ahead with the LFAR. Now talking about the structure, how is it placed for a central statutory auditor and for a branch auditor? The main thing to focus here is branch is a subset of central auditor. So whatever we are going to discuss in detail, almost all of the factors, because branch, the specifications of branch will also get covered in these factors, like credit risk. We talk about advances NPA, it is getting covered in the credit risk. We talk about the specialized reporting, that is forex treasury, it gets covered in the market risk on the other side. So as we can see, the component of branch is a subset of central, and the approach will be slightly different, but the premise should be made. It is risk-based reporting. That has to be the approach. That has to be the mentality for all of us. Now, actually talking about the approach. So for a central auditor, it will be a helicopter view. It will be like oversighting at different functions at a central level, like the market risk, credit risk, operational, etc. at a very higher level, at a very higher hierarchy. The focus on risk, trend, systematic report. Whereas for a branch auditor or for a branch LFAR, though the premise will be the risk, but the ground level view is the approach that has to be followed. We have to look into particular accounts, particular transactions specific to the branch, activities specific to the branch. And from there, you need to envisage what is the cumulative effect, what is the actual risk factor. So this is the main difference between the approach, the helicopter view and the ground level view. That's how we as an auditor have to plan our audit processes. Something at a central level cannot be applicable for a branch level, and vice versa. Accordingly, the audit procedures needs to be planned. We will see in detail what all areas or aspects are covered in the LFAR reporting applicable to central as well as the branch auditor. Again, few points just to highlight that how different is central and branch LFAR reporting. Overall objective is to provide a bank-wide risk assessment. It is at a bank level. For branch, it is at a branch level. However, very important, because branch का accumulation ही तो bank का एक central view बनेगा, right? So as a branch auditor, it is a very, very crucial role upon us to see what is the emanating risk the branch is running with. How effective we can make the branch LFAR, because that is what is going to get accumulated for a bank level. Bank level cannot happen in isolation. Nothing happens in isolation. Branch audit should never be seen as an isolation. Its LFAR, its input is going to get accumulated at a central level. So it is almost of an equivalent weightage. It is almost of an equivalent importance, that how do we plan, how do we perform the audit. Scope of coverage, it is specific to the branch operations. In case of branch, like there could be some areas happening at some branches, not at some branches, like forex, treasury. Only specialized branches are there. So accordingly, the audit procedures have to be taken care of. Whereas in case of central auditor, it includes a 360-degree view. How is the nature of approach? It is more of analytical, trend-based. Whereas at a branch, we have to deep dive. A thorough deep dive in a specific account has to be done. In a specific operation has to be done. What are the focus areas? It is more of at an overall level for central. For a branch, it is more of at an account level with a cumulative risk factor it holds up. At a process level, account, उसमें क्या issues है, क्या gaps है, वो हमने identify किए, will accumulate to a process level gap. Because branch में सिर्फ एक account के ऊपर focus करके we cannot emanate. We have to think through that how this can be linked to an entire process. How if there is an issue in some NPA related recognition norms or the practice which is followed at a branch, how it shows that why my process is weak at that particular branch. हो सकता है वहां पे कोई collusion of management हो, वहां पे ऐसे कुछ issues हो. So we have to see from an account level, we have to envisage to a process level. That is how the mindset has to be. How is the dependence of data? It is at a central MIS level for central auditors, SCAs, and for branch, it is at a specific branch MIS. More of on the sampling methodology, well to do like as per the branch volume, business nature, it has to be taken care accordingly. In case of central auditor, it is more of a risk-based across portfolio. So it is not pick and choose anything. It is an oversight on the overall portfolio. How is the usage of branch LFAR? As I earlier talked about, LFAR at a branch level collation helps the central auditor with a more insight. So it is equally important to have our branch LFARs as much effective and efficient reported issues, which will help at a central level to gather the insights. Again, various other factors which I have just differentiated, that how it looks for a central, how it looks for a branch auditor. Now moving on to the first most factor, the most critical or prominent factor for any bank, any branch, credit risk. That is my Schedule 9, loans and advances. This is the most important thing or most important factor in the financial statements of the bank, because here there's a lending, there's a direct credit risk that the bank or a branch is is going through because it has lended the money to the customers. So this is the most important thing or the most focused area in the LFAR. And RBI also has a lot of surveillance on the credit risk part of the banks, that how things are reported, how the things are getting managed at a credit risk level. Now, what are the core subsections within a credit risk? Like what important factors are reported? It starts with talking about the overview, structure, policy for the credit risk, for the loans and advances. Then there is a distinguishing of the life cycle of the entire advances. That what is the starting from the sourcing, the assessment, disbursement, the sanctioning part, the post disbursement part. So I have mentioned here all the types of stages of the life cycle of an advance. Under each of the segment, what has to be taken care of? First, as an auditor, we understand the particular area, how that process is being followed at a branch or at a central level. Say how the disbursement happens at a branch. Understand the process first. Understand the policy first. Only then you will be able to draft a very effective LFAR. Because LFAR is not just about putting in the observations that yes, there is some issue in the disbursement process, there is some issue with the approval process, some issue with the credit sanctioning of the borrowers. It is not just about showing what is the issue. It is giving a overall view about a process at a branch or a central level, and then stating that if there is an issue, yes, there is an issue. So the first most primary thing before we draft or start with the LFAR work is to understand thoroughly what are the processes for each section. Right now we are talking about credit risk. We have to also see what are the applicable policies or the internal governance of at a particular branch and a central level. After understanding the area, only then we will be able to see through that what are the observations and all. Just pausing here to reiterate, LFAR is not a complete reinvention. It is a subset of the actual audit that we had commenced throughout the year. So LFAR is like a final result. But उसका जो काम है, उसका जो on ground चीजें हम करने वाले हैं, execute करने वाले हैं, it starts right from the beginning of the financial year, when we actually start our audit, when we actually commence our branch audit or a central audit. So keep in mind, whenever we are discussing or talking about these components, there is nothing reinvention. You cannot deviate from your original report, the original start audit or the branch report. LFAR is just a supplement to it to give a more detailed insight, the more detailed information about a particular process. So keep in mind, everything of an LFAR, the components of LFAR have to be well addressed in your audit plan. Audit plan मतलब सबसे पहला जो चीज हम करेंगे audit start करने से पहले. So when we plan the entire audit, we have to consider the LFAR aspect also. So it is nothing we have to do newly. Branch audit, whatever XYZ days we take, it is highly impossible to complete a LFAR in, if we start to reinvent. So LFAR को as a conjunction देखना है. We do not have to reinvent everything and anything. Just do your planned audit. उसमें से जो outcome रहेगा वो आपका LFAR में जाएगा. And not the vice versa. And you cannot deviate from the reports. Branch audit report आपने कुछ XYZ comments दिए हैं. You have mentioned no material weakness, nothing issue, everything is fine. But when you are drafting your LFAR, you are saying this XYZ accounts है, उसमें NPA का issue था, recognition का issue था, income norms बराबर नहीं comply किए हैं, there is a management override. So there cannot be a major deviation between two of the reports. So we have to keep in mind LFAR work cannot be in isolation. It is a subset of our main audit. It is a subset, not a separate assignment. Again, coming back to the section, credit risk, we talked about what are the different stages of a life cycle of advances. So there could be some cases in which कोई branch में एक process होता है, एक process नहीं होता है. For just reiterating what Ketan sir mentioned, जैसे KYC related documentation branch में नहीं होता है, it is stored centrally. So likewise, it is important to understand कि life cycle में से कौन सी चीजें आपकी branch को apply होती है. Accordingly, you put the necessary disclaimers. Accordingly, you read through the policy of that branch and then you comment upon. So it is highly important to know what actually falls under your purview of the branch. If something is not there, then you have to appropriately give the disclaimers that yes, and it should be a management approved statement, that it has to be a management representation basically, that this doesn't happen at this branch, it is taken care centrally. It is stored, the KYC is stored centrally. There is no physical copy at the branch. Everything is available in digital, in a digitized format. So this was just a very common example, because in my experience also I've seen that things are not stored at a branch, they are taken care centrally. So accordingly, we have to keep in mind from this end-to-end life cycle, what applies to our branch, what is applicable to our branch, and accordingly we do the reporting of the LFAR. We frame out the observations and the processes accordingly. So we talked about how the credit assessment, nothing but how the actual sanctioning or how the evaluation of the particular borrower account happens. So under this line item at a branch level, we have to talk about how the practice of credit assessment is. Then the most classic case of gap or issue is difference in the approach followed by one branch followed by other branch, because दोनों जगह पे अलग-अलग team है ना, अलग-अलग segregation है, right? So there could be 100% chances that how a evaluation at a branch happens A and B. So here as a branch auditor, what is our role? We have to keep in mind that whatever is the approach, there could be some manual interpretations, some individual views of the credit manager at a different branch. It could differ one to one, but it should be all within the board approved policy at a bank level. Branch ka activities cannot override the bank's policy, right? So even though there is a deferred practice, even if there is a way the thing is done differently at a branch, make sure it is everything falling within the bank's overall policy. Nothing is overriding the bank's policy. And when I talk about policy, it covers all these aspects, whichever is applicable to the branch. Nothing should override the bank's overall framework. Assessment mein, we have to see how a case is assessed. Sanction and disbursement is all about the operations part. At some branches, there is a credit team, dedicated unit. There is an operations team who takes care of the actual disbursement of amount. So we have to see that how there is a process flow, how there is an accounting. केस क्रेडिट टीम से ऑप्स टीम के पास आता है तो मेक अ चेक का मैकेनिज्म है कि नहीं, या केस ऐसे ही डेलीगेट हो जाता है दूसरी टीम को. ऑल दिस आर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट थिंग्स टू नोट. Post disbursement processes, for example, the PDD documents, collection of security documents, or some covenants which are there as part of the loan agreement, जहाँ पे borrower को 30 days 60 days कुछ deferred time दिया जाता है, just an example I am taking. So ये भी कुछ चीजें branch level पे होती है. All these things are also taken care at a branch level. So we understand what is the process there. Are there any issues? Are there any non-compliances in that part? Review and monitoring, maybe not at a branch level, but some big branches, if some big units are there जहाँ पे core credit processing होता है, operation centralized है, जैसे West region is generally a very high volume business region for any type of bank, जहाँ पे business ज़्यादा है, west side, north side. तो generally banks have a bigger branches जहाँ पे start from the sourcing to the post disbursement review, everything happens. So in the review and monitoring thing, you have to see that how the accounts, especially the CCOD facilities, how are this being reviewed and monitored. इसका health check कैसे हो रहा है at a branch level. जो मेरे बड़े advances है CCOD में, how are those taken care of. Then we talk about the stressed asset, the restructuring part. The asset quality, we had a very amazing discussion with Ketan sir on the NPA and asset quality part. He gave a really nice, live examples through his experience. So I'll not take much time on the asset quality part, but yes, we can just correlate all those issues which he highlighted and how we should be reporting it in the LFAR. Because he time and again mentioned that चीजें LFAR में आएगी, तो कौन से section में आएगी? Credit risk में हम लाइफ साइकिल वाइज डिवाइड करेंगे स्ट्रक्चर को अंडर एसेट क्वालिटी सेक्शन. ऑल द काइंड ऑफ इश्यूज व्हिच आर रिलेटेड टू द एनपीए, द इनकम रिकग्निशन पार्ट, द IRAC compliance part, everything will come in the asset quality part. रिकवरी पॉलिसी, अभी एनपीए तो बन गया, उसके बाद का भी स्टेज होता है, राइट? द कलेक्शंस रिकवरी पार्ट, सो इवन दैट इज टेकन केयर एट अ ब्रांच. कुछ ब्रांचेस में डेडिकेटेड कलेक्शंस एक्टिविटी होती है, कुछ ब्रांचेस में एंड टू एंड सारी एक्टिविटीज होती है. सो इन कलेक्शंस पार्ट ऑल्सो the most type of common fraud is the misuse or the misappropriation of funds. That collect किया but वो deposit नहीं किया, customer के account में नहीं दिख रहा है, reflect नहीं हो रहा है. So in such cases we have to see what is the control, how is the segregation of duty, how is the maker checker concept, कि अगर आज collect किया deposit कब होगा, who authorizes the collection part, the deposition part, accounting entry कौन pass कर रहा है branch में, collection का बंदा collect करके आया, but is he the one passing the entry in the branch system? It ideally shouldn't be the case. So all these minute aspects we have to see. Branch का एक structure समझना पड़ेगा. That branch में जितने भी departments है, जितनी भी activities है, how it is structured, how are the people taking care of their responsibilities and role. Is there a segregation or is there a joint role a single person is doing? अगर मुझे ही collection and bookkeeping का दे दिया role, then definitely I am bound to do, the misappropriation part. So that is one classic example where frauds could happen in the recovery collection part. So any such kind of issues, you have to report it under this section. Large advances. So depending on the size and volume of the branch, you say top 5, top 10, top 50, whatever. Across different portfolios, not just focusing a particular portfolio. आप वो listing निकालिए, take it from the management. You are not supposed to prepare the list. You have to take it from the management because that is their data. What you work on those advances, वो आपका data है. Listing निकालना आपका काम नहीं है, वो management का काम है. They have to give, you have to understand the audit procedures for that accounts and then you report कि वो large advances में कुछ issues है कि नहीं. Right from the sanctioning, उसके credit norms में कुछ issue हुए, उसके collections में कुछ issue हुए, उसके कुछ PDD documents में कुछ issues है. So large advances में you typically cover the account specific observations. ऊपर वाले section में हम process level issues cover करते हैं with a significance to say 5 accounts out of 20 samples. Recovery में issue था, 10 accounts out of 50 samples there was a issue in sanctioning, credit norms. So in the earlier section you cover process plus the count of cases. In large advances you typically give branch level के जो large advance है उनमें कोई specific issue है कि नहीं. Willful defaulters, and other credit risk points like PSL, ECL, GS. These are also part and parcel of your loans and advances, right? आपके advances PSL, non-PSL होते हैं. RBI keeps a very keen eye on the PSL part, on the PSL achievement target of the banks, because this is a very sensitive area for any banking operation. That how do you classify a loan as PSL, non-PSL? 100% यहाँ पे आपको कुछ ना कुछ इश्यूज जरूर मिलेंगे. अगर ये PSL क्लासिफिकेशन मैन्युअली ड्रिवन एक्टिविटी है, अगर ये एक्टिविटी डॉक्यूमेंट कलेक्शन के बेसिस पे होता है ब्रांच में, so 101% you will get some or the other issue in this process. सिस्टम में कैसे टैग होता है, कभी कभी गलत टैगिंग हो जाता है, डॉक्यूमेंट करेक्ट नहीं है, डॉक्यूमेंट वैलिड नहीं है. उद्यम सर्टिफिकेट इज अ क्लासिक डॉक्यूमेंट that is collected for the MSME type of borrowers if we have to show them PSL. So we have to see the categorization, we have to see the type of advance. Again, in case of agri, just a simple land records, just a simple self declaration by a borrower. We have to look beyond these documents, that whether this actually evidences कि PSL होना चाहिए कि नहीं होना चाहिए. So this is like one of the areas जहाँ पे branch level आपको definitely issues मिलेंगे. Now, while I was discussing the life cycle, I did cover the key issues which generally get highlighted. Just quickly running past through, like credit quality, adherence to sanctioning norms, end use. End use was one of the topic we covered in the earlier section also with Ketan sir. जहाँ पे we have to look beyond that. अगर कोई loan disburse हुआ है, so what is the actual usage of that loan, especially in case of agri loans, because tracing the end use is like very difficult. There has to be a proper mechanism. तो आपको end use वाले area में भी issues मिल सकते हैं, that there is some diversion of funds, there is some routing of funds. So we have to see at a branch level that उनका end use verification का process कैसा है. Do they do some timely based check? मतलब आज loan दे दिया, but do they also check it within 6 months or maybe in a year's time, that where the loan was utilized? So see through it at your particular branch operations, that how do they validate the end use. Then we talk about the early warning signals. At branch level, are there any trigger systems? As in the system is throwing some type of alerts that यहाँ पे ये breach हो गया, limit breach हो गया, there is some exceptional credits into a particular account, especially the corporate advances. So you see through it at your branches, that are there any kind of alert generation system? In case branch में ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, तो you have to inquire that how the branch management or how the branch operations take care of such kind of scenario. मतलब सिर्फ लोन देना, पैसा कलेक्ट करना is just one thing, बट उसको रिव्यू करना, मॉनिटर करना, वो एडवांसेस का ध्यान रखना, पूरा लाइफ साइकिल, वो भी एक इम्पॉर्टेंट एस्पेक्ट है, राइट? सो also inquire about the type of review and monitoring the branch people do. Do they do it manually? Do they do it through a system based, alert based? So वो areas में भी आपको issues मिल सकते हैं. Then NPA and SMA classification, very in-depth discussion we had. Restructured account, large exposures, when I talked about the large advances, evergreening of loan, a very persisting issues across any type of bank you take the name. Evergreening is like a inherent risk. मतलब it can happen anywhere and everywhere. So we have to see through it कि आप कोई advance check कर रहे हो at a branch level, at a central level. You keep in mind that how are the remote possibilities or how are the possibilities of evergreening, and what is the branch and bank's mechanism to prevent this evergreening. मतलब यहाँ पे हमें रिस्क एंड कंट्रोल को पिक्चर में लाना है. ब्रांच में कोई चीज होती है, एक्टिविटी होती है, बट यू कोरिलेट दैट एक्टिविटी विद द रिस्क एंड कंट्रोल, नॉट जस्ट प्लेनली कि एक्टिविटी चले जा रही है. हाउ देयर इज अ रिस्क फ्रेमवर्क, हाउ देयर इज अ कंट्रोल फ्रेमवर्क एट अ ब्रांच, उसमें से आपको काफी इश्यूज मिल सकते हैं. Just by understanding the framework at a branch, you will get a lot of gaps in the process itself. And that you can accumulate at a sample checking कि हाँ आपको ये 10 अकाउंट में भी इशू मिला, यहाँ पे भी कुछ रिस्क है. So all that you can accumulate. Again, few classic examples of observation like inadequate stock and financial statements, incorrect security valuation, the way sir talked about the empaneled valuers ka responsibility, that there are fuzzy documents that are given. The branch manager has those pre-signed documents. So all such kind of factors you have to take care of. कि समझिए क्या framework है, क्या risk है, and how the process is actually carried out. There is a small, box. I'm not sure if it is visible. I'll read it out. So what are the industry-wide concerns which RBI has specifically mentioned out in credit risk? It is about, the 90% of frauds, 90% of banking frauds happen in credit risk. 90%, मतलब branch level ले लो, bank level ले लो. इसलिए मैंने specifically mention किया. Credit risk is the most important factor in the entire financial statement. Because मेरे 90% frauds are driven, RBI is saying that 90% से ज्यादा अपने क्रेडिट रिस्क वाले फ्रॉड है, एडवांसेस वाले फ्रॉड है, कॉर्पोरेट लोन्स में, रिटेल लोन्स में, एनी टाइप ऑफ लोन में फ्रॉड होता है. सो दिस सेक्शन ऑफ LFAR becomes the most, it's like a highlight, it's like the main thing or the main crux of your entire LFAR. If you fall weak on this section, your entire branch and central LFAR is gone for a toss. You have to keep in mind ये सेक्शन पे सबसे ज्यादा काम होना चाहिए, सबसे ज्यादा प्रोसीजर्स होने चाहिए, सबसे ज्यादा अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ पॉलिसी रिस्क फ्रेमवर्क होना चाहिए at a branch and central level. Again, one more point which RBI has highlighted is on the digital lending part. Now, not sure that at branch level कितना वॉल्यूम होता है डिजिटल लेंडिंग्स का, मेजरली मैनुअल चीजें होती है, बट इवन इफ एट सम ब्रांचेस इफ समथिंग इज टेकन केयर डिजिटली, सो यू हैव टू कीप इन माइंड ये डिजिटल प्रोसेस का भी आपका एक रिव्यू होना चाहिए ब्रांच लेवल पे, बिकॉज इवन इफ इट इज अ डिजिटल प्रोसेस, इट हैज इट्स ओन इनहेरेंट रिस्क. यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट एंटायर डिजिटल प्रोसेस. अभी तो हमारे मोबाइल ऐप है, इतने सारे एप्लीकेशंस है. वी आर कैरिंग अ एंटायर बैंक इन आवर पॉकेट्स. सो यू नो हाउ फार रीच द डिजिटाइजेशन इज ऑल अबाउट. सो इवन इन द ब्रांच ऑडिट वी हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड कि मेरा डिजिटल प्रोसेसेस क्या है, मेरी जर्नी क्या है, वो ब्रांच ने कौन से एप्लीकेशंस यूज किए हैं लेंडिंग के लिए, क्रेडिट इवैल्यूएशन के लिए. तो वो सारे सिस्टम्स को भी आपको अंडरस्टैंड करना पड़ेगा कि वो ब्रांच में क्या मैकेनिज्म है, क्या कंट्रोल है उस पूरे डिजिटल जर्नी प्रोसेस में. So this was about the credit risk part, wherein we talked about the life cycle, the framework, the core areas. Now we'll just go through like the typical case studies. We did talk about the evergreening, the incorrect NPA classification, weak financial monitoring, most classic cases जो generally हमें हर branches में मिल सकते हैं if we deep dive into it. So these are the very typical kind of issues that each and every branch might have in some or the other magnitude. It could be at a very big level or it could be at a very smaller level. But आप अगर उसको accumulate करेंगे तो एक बड़ा issue बन सकता है. Slightly talking about market risk, because not all the branches will have forex and treasury operations. So wherever it is applicable, you have to consider that how the entire life cycle of that forex operation is, how the treasury, if there are front, mid and back office trading desk at your branches, you have to take care of that how these operations are monitored. Is there is segregation of duties, what is the approval, the delegation part, कौन authorized है वो trade deals बुक करने के लिए सिस्टम में. तो ये सारी चीजें हमें ध्यान में रखनी पड़ेगी when it comes to the forex and treasury operations at a particular branch. So I have also listed out few of the issues that generally we might get at a particular branches, which is incorrect valuation. जो हमारा इन्वेस्टमेंट का वैल्यू होता है उसके लिए मॉडल इनकरेक्ट यूज कर लिया, जो बैंक सेंट्रली अप्रूव्ड है वो मॉडल नहीं है, कोई अपनी ही मर्जी से ब्रांच अपना खुद का एक वैल्यूएशन मॉडल बना के कर रहा है. सो ऑल दिस थिंग्स वी हैव टू टिपिकली टेक केयर ऑफ. Though there is a branch system, there is a decentralization, but we have to keep in mind nothing should override the centralized policy. Decentralization with centralization, that should be the key, that should be the mindset. Weak segregation of duties, breach of exposure, inadequate documentation, limit monitoring, the stop loss, the variance risk, deal confirmation. These are very typical kind of areas जहाँ पे issue मिल सकते हैं. coming to the third section, which is the governance section. We talked about credit, we talked about market. Now we are going to talk about the internal framework कि आपका जो branch है, आपका जो bank है, how is the internal governance taken care? What are the core things that get covered under this section? The first and foremost thing is the risk governance. How the risk at a particular branch, how the risk at a particular bank is being handled through a policy, through a structure. Then what is the assurance function? Assurance function is nothing but your internal audit team of the bank, the concurrent audit team of the bank, and the other support functions which give assurance on the activities. Then listed down the other areas, which are nothing but the books, reconciliation, subsidiary records, KYC, AML, cash and other security items, para-banking activity, the third-party products we all must be aware of. Mis-selling बहुत होता है third party products में, cross selling में, right? So these are like some of the issues that you could find. What is the MIS process at the branch level? What is the people process risk system risk framework? So under third section of the LFAR, typically we talk about the internal governance, the internal framework of the branch and the bank. कि यहाँ पे मेरी risk को control करने के लिए मेरी policy क्या बोलती है? How is the third line of defense of the bank, that is the internal audit of the bank is taking care? हर एक ब्रांच का कॉन्करेंट ऑडिट होता रहेगा. सो व्हेन यू आर ड्राफ्टिंग एलएफआर ऑफ द ब्रांच, यू हैव टू कंसिडर कॉन्करेंट ऑडिट का कितना इन्वॉल्वमेंट है, क्या उसके ऑब्जर्वेशंस है, तो वो सारी चीजें हमें ध्यान में रखनी पड़ेगी. What are the typical issues that we find under internal governance section? Is there is lack of board supervision. Governance structure is not independent, like there is no independent reporting mechanism. मेरा internal audit function within the bank is not risk driven. RBI, which is risk based internal audit. So RBI, the regulator, is focusing a lot on the risk based audits. It's telling the stat audits, the internal audits, to take up the RBA model. So if there is some gaps in the RBA framework, then the entire governance structure goes for a toss. Because then there is no oversight. मतलब मेरा risk को ध्यान रख के oversight हो ही नहीं रहा है. It is just going in isolation. It cannot happen like that, right? Risk को ध्यान में रख के ही आपको oversight करना पड़ेगा. What is the whistleblower mechanism? हो सकता है branch level पे कोई complaints raise हुई हो. So you have to check through that if there is any such kind of instances. With a keen monitoring, with a, keeping our eyes and ears open, we can see कि branch में क्या activities हो रही है. Like if there is any kind of collusion, any kind of complaints which are with being raised by the employees, that can give you a hint, a cue कि कोई तो fraud या कोई तो risk factor है उस particular branch में. So we have to keep in mind कि हमें सिर्फ branch के डेटा का चेकिंग नहीं करना है, हमें उस ब्रांच में क्या क्या चीजें, क्या क्या एक्टिविटीज हो रही है बाय द एम्प्लॉयज, बाय द स्टाफ, आल्सो दैट हैज टू बी कंसिडर्ड. Then few other items like effectiveness of cyber security, branch systems, delayed fraud reporting, high volume of unreconciled items. These are some typical kind of issues that gets reported under this section. What are the challenges? Challenges is nothing but management driven challenges or internal challenges which are like inherent risk basically. So it typically talks about all that challenges. These are the basic issues like the case studies. I briefly talked about it earlier. ICAP at a branch level, not applicable, just giving a bit of insight from a central point of view, that it becomes very important because ICAP document, the Internal Capital Adequacy Assessment Policy, this is the very crucial document for any bank. It's like a BCP because it talks about how the financial health of the bank is, how is the capital health of the bank is. So ये section में हमें इश्यूज कैसे टाइप के मिल सकते हैं? रिस्क वेट्स गलत लगा दिया, मेरे एडवांसेस को गलत फैक्टर से मल्टीप्लाई कर दिया, माय RWA इज कमिंग टू एन इनकरेक्ट पॉइंट, देयर इज नो प्रॉपर स्ट्रेस टेस्टिंग फ्रेमवर्क, there is poor documentation of this entire framework. So these are just a very gist of issues that could be considered under the ICAP. This is more of from a central, just reminding again, at a branch level, this might not be applicable. It is at a central point. Just thought to give a little insight, because yes, at ICAP level also there are issues which we have observed, like the typical issues which I have highlighted. As I talked about the specific case studies, incorrect risk weight, टेस्टिंग सिनारियोज, मेरी स्ट्रेस टेस्टिंग सिनारियोज गलत है, आई कैप डॉक्यूमेंटेशन प्रॉपर नहीं है, देयर इज नो एक्शनेबल फ्रॉम एनी काइंड ऑफ रिव्यू मीटिंग्स. So up till now we covered four major sections, which is credit risk, market risk, internal governance, ICAP. Now we are checking the fifth section, which is the going concern and liquidity. Again at a central specific level. But here we talk about the specific analysis of the balance sheet P&L items. कहीं पे कोई provisioning में issues है, कहीं पे कोई gaps है, कोई provision को consider नहीं किया है. If you have any kind of reservations on this particular points, वो आपके observations ये section में जाएंगे. Liquidity assessment, I have listed down what all factors are considered when it comes to the liquidity part. Types of issues is majorly on the disclosure norms on liquidity, the mismatch in maturity bucket, your asset liability management ALM, उसमें bucketing में issues है आपकी, stress testing scenarios में issues है. These are more of the typical type of cases that get reported under this section. Next section is purely on the information system, because a bank or a branch without the system is nothing. Like there is not a single branch, I would say, जो without system work करता हो, या जो without any type of application, IT application, any kind of portal, any kind of system work करता हो. Not at all possible in this era. So information system section becomes very crucial, since we are into a digital banking area, we are into a new gen area. So under this section, we typically report the IT related issues, the BCP related issues. So at a branch level, it can be seen through your regular visits, but from a central point of thing, your IT audit teams, the statutory auditors might have their dedicated IT teams who perform the IT audit as part of the annual plan. सो उनके जो भी इश्यूज रहेंगे आईटी ऑडिट के, वो आपके ये सेक्शन में रिपोर्ट होंगे. टिपिकल टाइप ऑफ इश्यूज भी user access management, there is override of control, there is no segregation of duty, there is no proper delegation of authority defined in the system. So all this kind of issues, there is no log monitoring, there is some sudden system downtime. Your banking system, your branch system are facing some technical issue, but there is no proper backup, there is no proper BCP in place. So ये सारे issues यहाँ पे report होंगे. Then other matters is something that is not specifically covered in the earlier sections. We can report it under this section, which talks about the accounting policies, the sufficiency of the statutory liability of balance sheet items. At the end of the earlier session, Ketan sir focused a lot on the off balance sheet items, the the non-fund based items. So all those comments can come into this section. Balances with bank, debt norms, branches में जो भी deposit related activities होती है, तो transfer to the debt account. After 10 years of inactivity, that is the broad guideline of RBI. So we have to see that branch level पे ये सारे section में क्या processes है, कहाँ पे क्या issues हो सकते हैं. Also, other areas is something very critical thing which I have pasted it here, is about the branch and credit audits. So ये central auditors के लिए क्या रहेगा? It will be a good section to report about their overall branch visits, overall credit unit visits, any type of issues that they have observed here. They can also talk about the balance confirmations which they share as a part of their audit. All such kind of supplementary things or subsidiary things can be reported in this section. So it gives a free hand to the auditor to report, not in a kind of a defined framework thing, but it can be reported in a more free hand way. कि जहाँ पे area covered नहीं हुआ है पहले section में, we can get it covered here. So we covered the branch credit unit, IFC, very important since we are talking about risk control. IFC is all about your risk control framework, the RCM. So उसके रिलेटेड कुछ इश्यूज है, उसके टेस्टिंग में, उसकी एडिक्वेसी में कुछ इशू है, उसके रिव्यू में कुछ इशू है, तो वो सारे यहाँ पे आपके प्लॉट आउट होंगे इन दिस सेक्शन. Then we have related to OPEX, any kind of issues in the operating expenses, provision kam zyada kar diya, not approved. So all that will be reported in this section. Another section on the fixed asset and the non-banking assets, because typically in some banks they do have depreciation related issues or maybe some non-banking asset related issues, the title issues. So all that can be forming part under this section. Now we completed the detailed section of the LFAR. Now we will take up a specific reporting requirement and how this should be placed in our LFAR. It is more of from a central reporting perspective, that how audit trail should be reported. That is, this was a very, now though it has become a BAU, but back in 2023-24, when this audit trail ka requirement came from RBI, that there has to be non-editable logs, entire audit trail of activities within the system of the bank. इसका रिपोर्टिंग कैसे होना चाहिए LFAR में? So here I have listed down that how our approach should be. So audit trail का generally verification should not collide, but it should be in conjunction with your IT audit at a central level. वहाँ के issues, वहाँ के particular points you can cover in the audit trail section. So ये पूरा piece आपका ITIS system का जो एक section मैंने आपको बताया था, amongst one of the 6 sections, वहाँ पे you can report the audit trail related requirement, that what is the management oversight, उनकी कोई internal policy है कि नहीं to maintain the audit trail, how are they reviewing. We as an auditor checking audit trail is a secondary thing. Primary responsibility to maintain audit trail is on the management. This is clearly stated by RBI that management should keep an audit trail in place. Auditor's responsibility is to ensure it is non-editable, it is existent throughout the year, it has never been disabled during the year, and all the core systems have this audit trail mechanism in place. So as an auditor, though we have a secondary responsibility, we have to report on this section. We have to give some comment ki whether it is sufficient, not sufficient, at what levels of reliance can be placed on the audit trail mechanism. The second most part or most kind of debated part is on the reporting of weakness in critical process. I have heard from many of my colleagues as well as from my different acquaintances about how should a reporting of critical process to be done in LFAR. Should there be a separate report? Should there be a separate certificate? Or should it be reported in a suitable section in LFAR? This thing is still not kind of डायरेक्टेड बाय आरबीआई कि हाँ ये यही फॉर्मेट और यही पैटर्न में आपको रिपोर्ट करना है, आपको ये LFAR में ही देना है, सर्टिफिकेट में ही देना है. देयर इज नो defined guidance on how you should be reporting weakness in critical process. But yes, this is a mandatory reporting requirement. Auditor has to give a comment on the critical process of the banks. Critical process, NPA is one of the critical process. Your valuation becomes critical process treasury mein. These are just few of the things I'm listing down. So branch level, there could be some critical process, right? So as an auditor, we are supposed to give a comment on how is the level of activity or the level of risk control framework for this particular process. Is there any material weakness? Now, how we will get to know if there is any material weakness? We have to see the internal audit reports of the bank. We have to read through the concurrent audit reports of the branches. वहां से हमें पता चलेगा कि कोई क्रिटिकल एरिया में कोई इशू है कि नहीं. वहां से मिला कि क्रिटिकल एरिया में इशू है, then we have to do our independent test. This is nothing but we are relying on some third party, the external reports, that is the internal audit and concurrent audit, and we are doing our independent test to form a opinion. अभी इस opinion को LFAR में डालना चाहिए, सर्टिफिकेट में डालना चाहिए, या a separate report has to be issued. It is not yet cleared. So it is As a prudent practice, I would say it is favorable to put it or place it in LFAR because LFAR talks about the entire health of the bank. So this can be a very good section to report in LFAR rather than giving a complete certificate as a prudent practice, because certifying something gives you, puts you under more responsibility, puts more onus on you. So instead, the ideal thing, as per my personal view, is instead of issuing a separate certificate, आप LFAR के suitable section में ये एरिया रिपोर्ट कर सकते हो, इसके ऊपर के आपके कमेंट्स रिपोर्ट कर सकते हो. Few other things other than what all things we have discussed is any comments on the new regulations. So at a central level, LFAR we have, and specifically at a branch level as well, wherever applicable. As an auditor, as a prudent practice, we should always be commenting on the banks and branch operation, on new regulations, new circular. कोई एक बड़ा change हुआ उनके process में, उनके structuring में, that fact should come in place or should be noted in the LFAR. That is one. Second is the new policy strategies that I talked about. Any revision in the accounting estimate, any management driven estimate. Third is weakness in critical process. The earlier slide we talked about. The internal controls, which is the IFC, the ICFR reporting. IT controls in the ITIS section. Previous period के जो भी observations हैं, RMPs हैं, previous year का LFAR, वो भी पढ़ना सबसे important चीज है, because that will give you an insight कि last time का LFAR कितने extent तक गया था, क्या level तक review हुआ था. From there you can scope out the areas which you want to take up in the current cycle. Also, it's your responsibility to keep a status on the last year's reported observation. What is the status? If any last year observation is getting repeated now, it becomes a high risk. Correct? It gets one notch up. The rating is one notch up. So accordingly, you have to report it. Any material events, कोई changes हुआ, कोई senior management change हुआ, कोई restructuring हो गया, कोई बड़ा business deal हुआ, which is changing or which is putting the bank or a branch at a emanating risk. So वो सारे events भी as a statement of fact ideally should be reported in an LFAR as a prudent practice, because all these areas not generally talk about the observations. It talks about the insights on the banks and branches operation. RBI as a regulator will get more insights on what is the auditor's independent view on all these sections. Now, after we covered all these sections of the LFAR, ideally, how should be the reporting format? First, it should talk about the policies and structure of that area. If there is any observation, only then this observation and all this structuring will come in place. In case कोई area में, suppose credit assessment is one of your branch LFAR का area, you don't have any observations in that. You have to put that fact in place that there are no discrepancies observed in that particular period. But you have to give a background of the credit assessment process. That is the ideal way to write the LFAR, not just simply mentioning no issues observed. First, you give a background that how is the credit assessment process happening at a branch. It can be a very short summary. Then you give the actual fact of the observation. This is the ideal format: observation, the risk, what is the root cause, what. Just giving an observation is a half done thing. You have to give a recommendation as well, because recommending will give more weightage to your observation. Because once you recommend something, you are telling the management that, see, this is something going wrong at a branch or a central level. You do this, it will get rectified. So always keep in mind that your observation should have a recommendatory para, should have a recommendation which is achievable. It shouldn't be something vague, something which is, very open-ended. It should be a defined timeline-based recommendation. Management response. Ideally, if it is available, it's very good to incorporate that in LFAR. It gives a more structured flow to the LFAR. The golden rules we need to keep in mind. It shouldn't be simply a yes or no type of remark. It should be giving a more detailed remarks, more reasoning, more weightage to our observation. We should prioritize the materiality and risk. We should use data-based observation. We shouldn't be just blankly stating issue in credit assessment, there is no delegation of authority, there is no approval in place, blah, blah, blah. This should not be the way. It should be backed by data that out of 100 cases, under 50 cases of personal loan, within that, if you have a further bifurcation, all that kind of structure should come in place when you write your observations. The last statement is very, very crucial. Ensure consistency with the main audit report. You cannot give a true and fair view in your main audit report, but in LFAR, you are reporting such kind of issues at a branch that it will raise a whole question कि वो branch बंद होना चाहिए कि चलना चाहिए. That shouldn't be the kind of reporting at a branch LFAR. We have to keep in mind. That's why the thing I will repeat again, LFAR is not an isolated thing, isolated assignment. It has to be planned well before in time when you start your annual audit. जब आप आपका start audit का work चालू करते हो, आपका branch का जो part होता है, you have to keep in mind LFAR में यही सारी चीजें use होने वाली है. आपको some चीजें here and there newly reinvent करनी पड़ सकती है, one or two things, not everything has to be reinvented. So always keep in mind it should be in conjunction with your main audit plan, nothing in isolation. Some common mistakes that we do, there is mechanical reporting, just a plain copy paste from the last year's LFAR कि last year credit assessment में ये process follow होता था branch में, ये steps होते थे. But this year if we see branch में वो operation ही नहीं है, वो डिसबर्समेंट का एक्टिविटी ही नहीं है, या जैसे एक एग्जांपल केवाईसी के डॉक्यूमेंट्स रखते ही नहीं है ब्रांच में. सो एवरी ईयर इट इज इम्पोर्टेंट टू फर्स्ट अंडरस्टैंड योर ब्रांच, अंडरस्टैंड द ऑपरेशंस, एंड देन यू रीविजिट द कॉन्टेक्स्ट. आई एम नॉट सेइंग कि पूरा LFAR लिखते बैठो, बट एटलीस्ट रीड इट वंस, then you revisit what needs to be changed, what needs to be incorporated. Ignoring the branch LFAR inputs, it's for the central statutory people that they cannot just completely ignore the branch LFAR. It's equally important. It gives more weightage to your process level issues for a central level issues. कि अगर आपके suppose 100 branches है, एक बैंक के 100 branches है, एक credit assessment का common issue, NPA related issue आपको majority of the branches में ये मिला. This gives a lot of weightage to the central stat auditor to report in the LFAR that yes, at the bank level, it is to be taken in cognizance that my NPA system has an issue, recognition issue. So that is how it should be given a weightage. Lack of linkage with financial statements, though we are talking beyond accounting concept, but everything has to be also linked with the financial statements. Overlooking the materiality, we have to we all are well versed with the materiality part, and as a seasoned auditors, we do consider materiality whenever we come across any kind of observation. So that is also a key when we talk about LFAR drafting. Kind of best practices. First, again, repeating the same, understand the operations, branch, the structure, the entire framework, correlate the LFAR financials, MOC, everything in sync. Analytical procedures होने चाहिए, exception reporting होना चाहिए. Documentation is the key. When I talked about the definition of my audit, I said D is for documentation. LFAR documentation is a must. आपने ऑडिट किया, उसके इनपुट्स आप LFAR में यूज कर रहे हो, बट यू नीड टू कीप अ प्रूफ, कीप अ एविडेंस दैट आपका एनुअल ऑडिट, आपके ब्रांच ऑडिट के वर्किंग्स आपने कैसे LFAR में कौन से सेक्शन में रिपोर्ट किए हैं, थ्रू व्हाट मीन्स. देयर कुड बी मेनी डेवलपमेंट्स. आपने mid of the year in a branch you found some issues. LFAR reporting to anyways happens after the financial end, right? There could be certain developments that could happen in that period. So you have to consider that trail. आपका documentation पूरा reinvent नहीं होगा, because what you did earlier, it's documented. You have to just extend from the LFAR point of view. But never mistaken one documentation which you did in the annual audit, that can be same considered as an LFAR. LFAR, it's a prudent practice to always document your LFAR things section wise as a separate thing for any kind of upcoming peer reviews or quality reviews. That's the best practice to do. So again, high risk, one of the other point that we should note, if it's high risk, do not just see at the technical compliance, look beyond it. If it's a जैसे NPA का area है, हम सिर्फ plainly IRAC norms driven audit करेंगे. If we never look beyond what are the loopholes in that particular norm, जहाँ से मेरा borrower कुछ evergreening की possibility कर सकता है. So the approach or the mindset should be कि for any kind of high risk area, you have to look beyond the technical compliance. It's like not just looking at कि framework follow हो गया, but see कि यहाँ से think from the the culprit's mind. It's like applying कि मुझे अगर fraud करना रहेगा तो मैं ये IRAC के norm में क्या issue निकाल सकती हूँ या how I can safeguard myself. Think from that angle. RBI's expectation, as we earlier talked, it has to be a risk-based auditing. It has to highlight the process deficiencies. It's not LFAR is not typically a compliance document. It's a risk diagnostic tool. It is like a health report of the bank and the branch. Few other key points, like we shouldn't be heavily relying on the management representation. This is the key rule for any kind of audit, any kind of area, not just LFAR. You just don't rely on the management representation. Always back it independently with your view. And accordingly, you should bring out the facts in your LFAR. Inadequate documentation. Again, we discussed in detail that you should be having section-wise documentation ready. You should not be having always the repetitive kind of remarks and comments. Have case-specific remarks, not just a mechanical reporting. And before we end, the last piece is on the timely management, that once you are planning your annual audit, keep in mind the LFAR reporting. Discuss well in advance with the branch people, with the central management people, that what is your expectation for the LFAR perspective. कि dedicated resources लगेंगे, annexures बनाने पड़ेंगे LFAR में. So for that, what all MIS data will be required, how much time it will take, because ये सब end moment, one day before you go and just give them your requirements, it's not going to get fulfilled. You have to plan it well in advance. You have to give them time. You have to take your time. So time management is the key. Be it LFAR, be it any audit. You have to put it in a timely manner. You have to execute and report it. So concluding this session with the key remark, a well-written LFAR doesn't just report what is wrong, it also anticipates what can go wrong. So LFAR mindset should be forward-looking approach, not the current fact-based approach. आज क्या हुआ वो तो हो गया, it's post facto. What could happen next? What issues can happen in that process? आज NPA के केस में आपको issue मिला, process में गलती मिली, process deficiency मिली. So recommendation plays a very important role here from an auditor, that you improve this, your process will improvise, your process will become more efficient. So I would take the leave from you all. Thank you for being such a patient audience and giving me this opportunity to present my views. Thank you. I hope it was an insightful session.
Thank you, madam. Now I request our deputy convener, Sri Lalit Bansal, to give a formal vote of thanks on behalf of our study secretary.
Thank you, Katarkaji. Still, so many survived. So, the word LFR is, even though it appears very small, but even I am also coming from banking industry, I can understand what kind of tedious and cumbersome exercise it is. So, let's not go by just word LFR, but it's a very, very long process of it, long activities. And I thank CA Priyanka Palav. She just 5-6 year experience, but I don't hesitate to say the kind of confidence he has. Even after 25-26, I don't have that kind of confidence coming on the stage and dais and speaking that confidently. So really, young dynamic CAs, those nowadays having a lot of confidence and delivering speech at such august gathering. It's not an easy job. So let's, comment on. Thank you. Thank you on behalf of JB CP Studies Circles. We will thank you for this delivering this session, and it was really wonderful. Thank you.